G'day, this is Expand the Phantom Podcast. We are a website, a podcast, and a way of life. You can find us at chroniclechamber.com. I am Jermaine, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Action scenes are a critical component of any Phantom story. So, how does a comic creator seek authenticity, credibility, and high-level danger and originality in combat scenes and drill sequences? Answer: consult a stunt person. Phantom writer Julie Ditrich and film and TV stunt performer Alex Jewson discuss how they collaborate the psychology of fight scenes and the dramatic and emotional effects they are seeking when choreographing action for comic book pages. As you can tell, if you've listened to this podcast a few times, I did not write that. So thank you, Julie, for writing that for me. So to start off with, how are you guys going?
Very
Alex,
well.
Yeah, so look, we're going to get into all that type of stuff, and I know when we first talked about this a couple of months ago, Julie, it really intrigued me because the Phantom's such a unique character. But before we get into the weeds and body motions and how all that type of happens and stuff like that, let's learn a bit more about you. So, Julie, you've appeared a little bit on some of our podcasts in the past, but to start off with, just tell us in a couple of minutes. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the field, what you do day to day, and then we can, kind of go into there, and then also how you got involved with the Phantom, and then we can go to Alex, and then we can get into the weeds of action scenes.
well, in a nutshell, I have a professional writing degree, but never once were comics ever discussed in that 3-year course. So I stumbled onto comics by accident in the mid 90s, and I ended up being a comic book writer and working for a couple of overseas publishers, including Image Comics, and then wrote a whole bunch of stuff in Australia as well. My genre of choice is usually fantasy, but I do love action, and I watch a lot of action movies and things like that. So the way I got into the Phantom was I went to a dinner, and it just so happened that Glenn Ford was there, and we ended up having a great chat. And he invited me to work on the Phantom. At that stage, he wanted me to work on either Julie Walker or Diana Palmer stories, but then I sent in a whole bunch of pictures, and which he accepted. But then he came to me out of left field and said, "Do you want to work on the Princess Sin story, the sequel to the three 1970s stories that came out?" And I said, "You betcha." So I did that, and then that moved into the sequel to The Golden Circle, which came out earlier in the year. Then I wrote a story that's set in Australia called Simulacra, which I think will come out next year. All the art's done, all the story's done, but not quite sure what's happening. And I sort of have a fourth story. The outline's been ready for about 6 months, but I'm just waiting for sign off on that before I write the script. So that's my story and my background.
So, quick question, again, without getting sidetracked too much, but I did say, and I did promise you that we will get sidetracked during this podcast, is those other pictures that you have worked on, are they still going to become stories or?
Well, they were all pretty much signed off on. There's
Yeah.
probably about another 10. Some of them are short, as in 32 self-contained ones, and some of them are longer. There's one particular Diana Palmer story that I really want to do that's been signed off on, which is probably anywhere between 48 pages to 96 pages. But I can only work on them one at a time because I do actually work on my own comic book stories as well outside of the Phantom. And I also work part time for a children's charity called Books in Homes. So I do all the communications there and bring on role models from all over Australia to visit schools. And it's a charity that helps kids who are disadvantaged get 9 new books a year
Oh,
and
wow.
supports their literacy efforts.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think, oh, was it? I think you've had Dean Rankin, who's known to some fans and some others and stuff involved with that charity as well, haven't you?
Yeah,
Um,
Dean used to be a role model, but he's actually going to be the book catalogue role model in next year,
yeah,
in term one of next year. So he gets a whole front page of the book catalogue, which goes out to about 12,500 kids. And one of his books is on the program as well.
yeah, nice, nice. Awesome. And so Alex, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us the difference between um the different levels of stunt coordinators and stuff like that. Tell us how you got into the field and then tell us how you and Julie got connected.
So the first answer you have to give, otherwise you lose your license when someone asks you that, is you either took a crash course and became a stuntee, or you fell into it. That's required as part of our ticketing. You have to give those answers. For me, I actually I started in the circus. I ran away with the circus when I was a kid, and
Nice.
became a circus performer. And then around the time that I was starting university, I was looking for trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And amongst those considerations, I stumbled across stunt performing as a thing. I'd always loved action films. I loved Jackie Chan movies and, all that old stuff. And I looked into it, and I already had a bunch of the qualifications that I needed to become a stunt performer in Australia. And so I ended up dropping out of university and doing that instead, which I think was one of the best decisions I ever made, because I've absolutely loved my career in stunts. It's been amazing. Um, in Australia, the grading procedures is probably not super interesting for anyone who's interested in becoming a stunty. You can look it up. Just look up Australian stunt grading procedure, and you'll find it on the MEAA website, the Media and Entertainment Arts Alliance, which is the union that covers film in Australia. But we have a bunch of grading sort of levels, and so you start out as a baby performer, and you work your way up, and the top level of that is stunt coordinator. So far, I've achieved the second highest level, which is the assistant stunt coordinator, but I'm specifically not a stunt coordinator yet, and it is a big deal for those of us in the industry for that to be a title. So I never claimed to be a stunt coordinator.
Yep, yep. Now, two things. First of all, not sure I like the idea of Jackie Chan movies and action movies and all that being old because that's what I grew up on as well, and that classifies me as old. So I might have to pull you up on that one. And the second thing, what did you do at the circus?
I got into circus because oh, this is a long time ago, but a very lovely person volunteered their time to come and teach circus as a school sport. I went to a performing arts high school, Newtown Performing Arts High School, and so they were a little bit out there in a lot of their activities, but they offered circus as a school sport, and so it started as really basic circus stuff like juggling and hula hoops and the kind of the general object manipulation kind of stuff. But then after a few years of doing that, I ended up working for a few different professional circuses and touring and doing all sorts of stuff, and just sort of ran away with that and had a great time doing it. And it was a lot of fun. And then eventually transitioned into doing film and television instead of live performance. So the way I found film and television, I was on tour with a circus, and we had a documentary crew come on board to like do a thing on our circus, and it was my first time where the documentary crew would like stop and shoot us doing rehearsals or whatever, but they would ask us to like do it again or do something differently or give an interview moment or whatever as part of their documentary. And it was my first experience working specifically for the camera instead of for a live crowd. And I still love performing live. Performing live is amazing fun, but I found I just fell in love with the performance for camera, because you did 3, 10, 30 takes until you had it exactly the way you wanted it to be. And then you'd print it and you'd send it off, and they'd edit it and put it into a thing. And it was like that forever. You got to keep that. That was a thing so it's like some level of like perfectionist and permanence in those performances, which is a very different thing to performing live. And performing live has a lot of amazing things about it as well. And bouncing off an audience is great fun. But I fell in love with camera. So I wanted to pursue more of that. And that's how I became a stuntie.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, did you ever know about the Phantom prior?
Oh yeah, yeah. I started reading the Phantom must have been early primary school. I
Okay.
was a big Phantom fan as a kid. Um, it was not until Julie contacted me that I ever thought that I would be involved in it, though, because I'd never had anything to do with comic books as a professional sort of side of things. Julie was the first person to inquire about my services for that, and I'm very glad that she did because I've had an amazing time so far.
Yeah, wow.
As I'm very, very glad that we got in contact with each other.
So, Julie, how did that happen? How did you get in contact with Alex amongst all of the like where did the connection come from?
Well, I just want to establish that I have really clear vision of the kind of stunts that I'd like in the stories themselves, but I don't have Paul Mason's experience, for example, who is, a martial artist. I did karate when I was, between about the ages of 19 and 21. Got about halfway, but I could never get the turning kick right. And one other kick, so it's kind of died away. But I knew that in order to elevate the action scenes, I really wanted to talk to someone who understood and how to drill down into key moments within the choreography. So I got on to friends of mine who run the makeup effects group, Paul and Nick, and Alex had worked for them before, and I was just mentioning it, and they recommended Alex. And then I got in contact with him, and the next minute he's doing all these kicks and demonstrations in my lounge room as we're planning the Princess in story. And then it just went on from there. So I'd get on to Alex when I wanted to get some understanding of a stunt. And then we would, I'd say, look, this is what I want. This is the kind of style I'm looking at. And then he would send me all this information. We'd look at, you know, clips on YouTube of certain stunts and scenes from films and splice together all these kind of kicks and rolls and all kinds of things. But the amazing thing that Alex taught me, which I'm very, very appreciative of, very grateful for, is he helped me understand the psychology of fight scenes in a way that I hadn't before. And I have a story up for you later on a particular sequence in the Phantom story that came out earlier in the year, because he actually made me a better Phantom rider because of my communication and professional relationship with him as well.
Look, more than happy for you to share that right now. Just quickly, if you're listening to this on audio, this will also be on YouTube, and we will, when we're talking about moments of the stories, or we will be having stuff of the story showing up on YouTube as well. So you're not just looking at our faces, you can also be having a look at the story as they're talking about these action scenes as well. So please feel free to share that story with us and specific examples
Yeah, I'd like to give you a few examples. In it was 96-page story, which is The Return of the Golden Circle. And there might be some spoilers in here. So if you haven't read it, just be prepared for this. I had asked him, I had asked Alex for a scene in a theatre similar to a movie I had seen when I was a kid called Scaramouche, which was with Stuart Granger and Eleanor Parker and a whole bunch of other fantastic actors from the 1950s. And it has the best fencing scene that I've ever seen in films. But there's no fencing in this particular scene. I just referenced that as something that I would like to see in the finale, in the climax of the Phantom's story. And then I showed Alex the location and the interior of the theatre, which is a real theatre. It was for Marie Antoinette in Versailles, and I had looked at all these YouTube videos of what it looks like underneath and what it looks like in the actual theatre itself and up in the those balconies and things. So Alex was very helpful in choreographing that. But more significantly, and this one came out of left field, and this is the one I really want to reference. The opening scene I had already created, and it was with a python. And I had done all this research into the pythons in Africa, and I just casually threw it into the conversation that I had this 20-foot python, which is around what 6 meters or so, and I had already written the scene. That's exactly it. And I said to Alex, "Oh yeah, I've written this python scene," and he goes, "Well, how long is it?" And I said, "It's 20 feet, around 6 meters, just over 6 meters." And he goes, "Do you know that in life, if you have a snake that size, you need one man or one human for every 3 feet of snake to be able to do what you're doing in this story?" And I went, "Uh-oh." The Phantom's good, but under those circumstances, to make it realistic, I don't know that he could handle a 20-foot snake in this way. I know he's strong, but he might not be able to wrestle a 20-foot snake without getting into trouble. So Alex helped me understand that that might not be completely credible. And so I had to think outside the box and completely rewrote the scene, because then I started to think, well, what might cause the snake to let go? And then I remembered seeing this photo from South America of a snake that had somehow or another got eaten, not eaten, but accidentally got embroiled with a porcupine, and it had all these quills sticking in and out of its mouth and all over its head, and it couldn't actually function. And people had actually saved the snake and pulled out the porcupine quills. And so I started to think, well, maybe what if I got some sort of really thorny leaves and branches and stuck them in between the coils and in around the head of the child? What would the snake do? Because it's not going to swallow something that would cause so much pain. And so I rewrote the scene, and that goes back to a single moment of Alex mentioning that to me. So I'm very grateful. It actually forced me to even be more creative than I had been before. So thanks, Alex.
My pleasure.
Awesome. There's in reading this story, there's definitely a lot of acrobatic work. The Phantom's very theatrical in the way he moves and stuff like that. So yeah, it's when we were talking about this and then when reading the story, I could definitely tell that there was yeah, there was some help out. Any particular scenes or anything that you just want to make mention of or kind of go through?
Yeah, I'd like Alex to, because he was very helpful with the fountain scene, in um, the the civil office. It's in, yeah,
Okay.
there. He was very, very helpful with that scene as well, because this is where he looked at the psychology of it all. So maybe I'll pass
Yeah.
that over to Alex to comment on that. This, of course, being in a public setting in Paris, and there's a lot going on in this scene. Some people have picked it and some people haven't. So, but on the surface, there is just that one kind of stunt with the fountain, and I'll let Alex talk about it with you.
So, one of the reasons that I love the Phantom and one of the reasons I enjoy designing action for the Phantom is because the Phantom is both a superhero but also extremely grounded in reality. He's not Superman. He's a person, and he's a person that he's a well above average person. Don't get me wrong, but he is a person, and so there is a call to bring some grounded realism into the story all the time. And like the Phantom is, Olympic level at gymnastics and martial arts and a bunch of other things, but you are bound by keeping him to being a human person to keep it believable and realistic. And that's not always the aim with comics, but I certainly find it very engaging as one of the reasons I enjoy the Phantom in the first place.
Very true.
When designing action for these sorts of scenes, it's a lot of it is thinking about just like with any action design, it's thinking about what the story needs or what the story or the character needs to do. So what are the characters' motivations in this scene? What are they trying to achieve? How would they go about doing that? Because any good action design, just like any good dialogue, should be furthering either the audience's understanding of the character or the story, or both. Whenever you're doing any kind of blocking or action design, whether it's for film or for comic books, if you're not furthering the story in some way, then it's just this action set piece for no reason, and it loses a lot of that emotional stake. It loses a lot of the narrative weight that it carries. And so certainly when I'm designing, and one of my favorite things about working with Julie is when she's writing, she's always looking for those beats, those emotional stakes, those story points. How can we tell the next part of the story in a way that fits this character and fits this scene? And that's always really fun. So with this particular scene, the Phantom isn't free to do whatever he likes. He's got to appear to be a regular person in his actions. And so we thought very hard about making sure that he wasn't breaking his cover essentially, and remaining Kit Walker and not the Phantom from the point of view of this thing. One of the things that was also really interesting for me, this was one of the first scenes that I did with Julie, and coming from film and television, because at the point that we did this, I think I'd been doing film and television for 15 years or something. I had to modify the way I thought about action a little bit, because it's not quite the same for comic books as it is for film and television. A lot of it's similar. There's plenty of crossover, but designing action for comics, you're limited to 1 to 6 frames, maybe, when you're talking about doing something. So a lot of the actions that we might use in film just don't sell, because you can't tell the story to the audience in the very limited number of cells that you have in order to get across whatever the action is. It's quite an interesting challenge as an action designer to design around only 3 frames of something to tell the whole story of this action. And so that's been a fantastic challenge for me, and Julie's been very helpful in helping me understand like how much time and space you have and what the audience needs to get something across. And one of the reasons we bounce pictures and videos backwards and forwards so much when we're designing this stuff is because it helps us find not just something we think would fit the Phantom, but something that we think will tell the story in the amount of space that we have, in an appropriate way that the audience will be able to pick up on. And that's really fun to do. I actually don't remember exactly the interaction we had around the fountain scene. Maybe Julie could remind me exactly what she loved about this one, but
Yeah, well, you talked to me about the psychology of the fight scene. And because it was a public, outside of what you already identified, which is not breaking cover, this is one of the earlier scenes. So we've also got rising action. So the stunts get more and more complex as we go on towards the finale. But at this stage, you talked about the fact that he he needed to dispose and get rid of this guy really quickly and effectively, keeping in mind that there's people around there with cameras taking, you know, footage on their phones. And I think Wendell, I'll mention to the viewers again that I've worked with a wonderful Brazilian artist called Wendell Cavalcanti, and Wendell put in a couple of people with their phones. You can see that down the bottom. Yeah, that's it. So we've got to keep in mind that the Phantom's not going to draw too much attention to himself here. He's just going to dispose of this idiot as quickly and efficiently as possible and not turn it into a big street fight. So that was the thinking here. You have to look at context as well.
Yep. Yep. No, well done. There's another guy there with the phone as well. So no, that's awesome. Is there another scene,
Yeah.
another action scene that we can quickly talk about?
Yeah, I'd like to reference the end of issue 1. I didn't necessarily work on this here with Alex because I actually consulted a one of Alex's friends who's actually like a munitions expert. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that the right word? A munitions expert?
He's a munitions expert and a pyrotechnician. So he does pyrotechnics for film, and he works in armory and pyrotechnics.
Yeah. So in this case, I wrote the scene, and I had this is actually based on a real life. It's inspired by a real life escape from a French jail by this master criminal who had some plastics, explosives that had come into him through a visitor who'd had them in, I think, in a small, from memory, a small, like a cigarette container, a pack. And there was enough of these plastic in there for him to put it on the door and blow the door, and then there was a helicopter that came and picked him up and escaped, right? But I had written the scene, and like the whole room exploded and blah, blah, blah. And then when I consulted with Dan, who's the expert, he then broke it all down in scientifically and determined, because I wanted to sneak it in a tissue pack that had been given to the Phantom, and it looks really innocent. And of course, it wouldn't have been picked up at security. And he said that the quantity of the plastics in the tissue pack would not blow the whole room. What it would do would blow the door, and also all the shock waves would blow up and out. But you need to, for the people to survive, you actually needed to have a skylight in the room so that the shockwave could pass through that. So that's what we did. And this is actually, quite true to life, I have to say. But the significant scene that Alex worked on with me also in this particular story is, of course, the scene in the enclave, the Golden Circle, their old headquarters that the Phantom accesses via the underground tunnels. So we've got this fight sequence here. The significant thing here, once we enter this, because the Phantom doesn't know what he's walking into, they all know that he's on his way, and that's all prearranged.
I should put in quickly before we move on. Dan Martin is the pyrotechnician, and he's a wonderful pyrotechnician. He's blown me up more times than I can count. He's a very reliable person to be strapping explosives to someone. He's a lovely guy.
Yeah, Dan was a lovely guy, or I should say, he's still alive. he is a lovely guy, and it was wonderful working with him. But this particular cage fight, there's a psychology to this too. One of the things I'm very aware of domestic violence and hitting and not hitting women and all that kind of thing. By saying all that kind of thing, I'm not being flippant at all. Um, I do know that the comics do have a legacy that the Phantom does not, you know, punch women as well. But the Golden Circle Gang are extremely dangerous women who've got no compunction about killing, and that was established in the 1939 story, 1940 story. So he's in real danger here with these three fighters. But the way we got around it, and this is where Alex came in, is my brief was that the Phantom would use defensive maneuvers only, and a lot of the moves that he would use would be things that he might have picked up from the jungle by watching animals. I know that sounds a bit strange because it you can't necessarily see that, but that's the underlying thought to it. So, what's that move again? Because I did write it in, and it was all like I had all these YouTube videos to show. Wendell, what's that snake move that you
I,
told me about,
I think
Alex?
it might have been in the last frame, the anaconda roll,
The
which is
anaconda roll.
a type of choke that is used in real fighting, but is known as the anaconda roll, and it seemed very suitable for a jungle themed fight scene.
Yeah,
So this is
the
the one here
anaconda
on the bottom of page 83.
Yep,
Yeah.
anaconda roll. And of course, the one where he's actually using his hands across the top of the cage like a monkey in a forest. Um,
we had him
Yeah.
brachiating across the cage.
Thank you. There it is. Brachiating. That's the right word. That was
On
in the
page
script, but I
86.
wouldn't remember that without you prompting it, Alex.
And
Yeah.
I guess this kind of as a reader whose stunt coordinated expertise is watching Jackie Chan and Vaughn Clone Dam and Steven Seagal and all those classics from the 80s and stuff like that. The thing that as a fan is that he's not the overgrown, muscle bound brute person who he's not Arnold Schwarzenegger at his height. He is more of that live, that more of that athletic, like a swimmer bottle or an AFL footballer type of someone who, like you said, can brawl it out, but also can monkey bar, for a lack of a better term, the top of the cage and stuff like that. So I think
It,
I
it
really
was
like the
also
balance that you've
that
done
was
here.
always something that we considered because while the Phantom is physically stronger than any one of the three opponents he's fighting here, the Phantom has never been most famous for fighting with his muscles. He's a great fighter, but he
Yeah.
fights more than anything with his brain.
Yes.
He outthinks his opponents generally,
Yeah.
and so it from the very beginning of this fight, it's about controlling the space. The first thing he does is make sure that he can't be attacked by all three of them at the same time. He redirects one of them into another, like he makes them get in each other's way. He really controls that space and then uses this jungle themed fighting style that we sort of built for this scene to show off the skills that the Phantom has, and it all starts with how he outthinks his opponents.
Yeah. Very
Thank you,
well said.
Alex. You said that really beautifully.
Mm, mm. And it's not. I like how, like you said, it's defensive, but it's also it's defensive in the sense that he just because he could quite easily just punch the girls, but as you said, Julie, that's not the Phantom. That's not the Phantom that we grew up on. It's not the Phantom that we love. It's defensive, but it's also taking the fight to them as well. So there's that real fine balance, even with the same on the in the water fountain scene, which we talked about before as well. Again, he could have just quite easily, punched him and it would be all over, but that's not who the Phantom is. So there's that fine line of having to win the fight, but keep his morals, keep the law that has been established over 90 odd years.
And for this scene, I think there must have been like 20 different moves that we discussed and looked over and sort of considered and figured out how we were going to put together before really narrowing it down to the ones that Julie really loved and that really told the story that Julie wanted to be able to tell. And it was a lot of fun to find the beats that really worked for this scene and for this for this character.
We had an entry point, we had the setting, and we had an exit point. And then, Alex, you helped me coordinate all those moves in between. If I had more than 6 pages, I would have gone to town on this, but I had 6 pages for this entire action scene. And, I had to say goodbye, to some of the moves that I would have loved to have seen in here. And had this been filmed, boy, you would have gone to town on that, wouldn't you?
Oh, look, it doesn't matter what media it is, even in film fights, we very frequently leave half of the fight on the cutting room floor. Unfortunately, there's always limits on production time and scheduling and filming and everything. Doesn't matter what the medium is, you're always going to have to cut it down to something. And this was a great fun fight to put together, even though we lost some of the stuff we wanted. I think what we ended up with was really great.
Mm. Mm. You wouldn't by any chance have the Princess Sin story there, would you, Jermaine? Yeah, I don't know whether you remember it, Alex, but the first one that you helped me with, the most significant part of that was the finale, the climax, where he actually dives over the cliff onto the ship. So we had to work it out so that he didn't smash on the ship and kill himself. And so you looked at it from a gymnast point of view, like a physics point of view, and you talked about when he dives and then he grabs that rope and what he'd have to do, to flip over a few times. It looks very theatrical, but from a scientific gravity level, uh, you know that actual all those kind of roundabout moves, I'm not using the right words for them, actually would slow his rate of descent and allow him then to jump on board. So if you can remember that, could you walk
Yeah, for sure.
us through that?
Something stunties learn very early on in their career is it's not the fall that hurts, it's the slowing down, it's the hitting the ground. So it's about washing off impact before you get to the ground as much as possible.
So,
But
so
for that,
can I just, so you're saying that as you're falling, if you're moving about, for a lack of better terms, that actually slows your descent? Is that what you're saying?
oh look, not noticeably if you're just in the air. But what we had in this comic was it was a ship, and that included ship's rigging. And so
Yes.
we had ropes and other things that he could grab onto and use to wash off momentum. And the way we ended up approaching it, I think I pitched, I showed some high bar sort of stuff from the Olympics, the Olympic high bar, because they do some incredible tricks on high bar. There's a lot of acrobatic movement, but the amount of force that goes in to those tricks is huge. They have huge forces that go into those that are impacting their bodies. And the way they do those is by redirecting momentum rather than stopping momentum. And so the Phantom never stops his momentum. He doesn't fall and land. He falls and he catches a rope and swings and he washes off power in that swing and then uses that to like achieve the next part of his thing where he lands and rolls. And at every stage, he's reducing the force that his body is having to take. And it was really fun because it is fairly grounded in reality, and there is definitely a big adventure, scene element to it. It's not the sort of thing I would try for real if I was uh, jumping off a cliff, but it's certainly for I believe we got it within the realms of acceptability for realism and for the audience, for the suspension of disbelief that a Phantom audience has. Like we managed to ground it in the reality that exists within the Phantom comics. And I finding ways to achieve that is just, it's fun. It's fun to figure out, how do you take someone who is in essentially free fall and not kill them when they land? And that's something that we do a lot in film. We figure out ways to, bounce off things. And like Jackie Chan is very famous for bouncing off awnings, or catching things halfway down and falling onto something else. Like there's lots of ways you can slow down momentum, and we found some really good ones that worked within the scene with the ship's rigging and the stuff that we had to, that, well, it wasn't the only option we looked at either. We looked at like landing on sails and other things as well. But the one we went with was this sort of gymnastics idea, which was, I thought, pretty cool.
Yeah.
I remember that scene.
The work that's not out yet, Simulacra, the one that's set out in the Daintree, that's got a lot of fantastic stunts in it. I'd love to be able to talk about it here, but it's not
Next time.
out yet. So yeah, next time, because that is really interesting to deconstruct with Alex's point of view and his experience on it.
Okay. Anything you can say that might give us a bit of a tease or anything about that without crossing any lines?
No.
No? All
Yeah,
right. Well, it's
I don't want to get myself in trouble. I'm not going
I
to.
know, no. Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. So
There's a lot of surprises in that one, and I can only talk about it, and
yeah.
Alex really can only talk about it until it's out. I
No,
mean,
that's
you've seen a couple of the
yes.
panels we've released, and the location, which is the Daintree. So I'll talk about the themes of it when it's out, and then we can deconstruct all the stunt work, because I think it was really, really important for that. So I'm very
I
glad.
definitely can't talk about any of the stuff that I want to. So,
No,
Yeah.
that's not a problem. So,
So
Alex, I've got a question for you. So, what what makes the Phantom unique for you from a lack of a better term, a stunt point of view?
um, so it's a few things. It's you've got a superhero world. It's because it's a superhero world that the Phantom operates in, but he's a decidedly human hero. He's very human in his heroicness. And all the mythology is mythology in world for him. Like it's all the mystique of the Phantom is mystique that he has fostered as a character. He's fostered that mystique of the ghost who lives. And so when you're thinking about action design for him, you're thinking as much about his idea of the portrayal of the character, the Phantom, as you are about the audience's point of view of seeing, like, and telling the story, and as much about that as about the actual fighting, because you're trying to bring together the actual martial arts and gymnastics and movements that are possible in real life that he can do, and in some cases looking for the real epitome of that, because he is supposed to be a very talented human. He's not just an average person by any means. And so you're pushing the limits on that, and going through UFC fights and gymnastics reels and stuff, looking for movements that are really like up there in terms of like the paragon of humanity kind of movement. Combining that with him maintaining this mystique of the Phantom, and keeping that character, and what we all love about that character alive is that the mystique is as much a part of that comic and as much a part of Kit Walker's idea of who and what the Phantom is, and what he portrays the Phantom as. And so trying to balance all of those things, and then fitting that into the limited space that we have for any kind of comic action scene, those three things together is what makes choreographing for the Phantom so much fun for me. And of course, getting to work with a wonderful writer like Julie, who's just so keen on really grounding it in reality. So, I mean, going back to the theater, we watched a documentary on that theater to get a better idea of the space, so that we could kind of block out how the story would escalate with the different fight scenes, like how each action set piece would be able to build on the last one based on their movements around this real life theater. And all of that goes into making the story more interesting and not just grounded. Like someone can go to that theater and see all the things that have been included in that story. And they'll be able to put together, you could reenact the fight scene in the theater if you wanted to, which is really cool. But having that kind of again, it's similar to my love of camera. It's chasing that perfection. It's figuring out what the perfect frame to tell this story, this action, this character moment for every cell in a comic book. And it's like, in some cases, it's harder for a comic book because you only get that one cell per action moment. Whereas in film, we frequently show things from multiple angles or over again. It's very common for us to show the same action twice, which you can't really do in a comic in the same way. You don't have like, you kind of have slow-mo, but not quite the same way. Like the challenges of working in that comic book format for me were really fun. And I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to learn more about comic writing and action design.
Interesting.
I mentioned before that I've got a fourth story. The outline's been done for about 6 months. I've been waiting for 6 months for it to be signed off on to go to but that's because they're so busy at FRU. But Alex put me on to one of his buddies who works out of London, and he's very specialised in the stunt work that he does. His name's Mike Snow. So I'm just sitting there waiting for that sign off so I can do the final action choreography with Mike. It's very, very specialised and very specific. So, and that's a completely different very different feel to this story and a very different subject matter. But
and can we reveal Mike's specialty just as a shout out for Mike?
Oh,
can we
yes,
we reveal that?
Reveal it. Yeah, Mike's
so
great.
A lot of people would know Mike as the Ginger Ninja from Ninja Warrior. He does a lot of sort of parkour Ninja Warrior type movement stuff, and he's fantastic at that. Julie initially asked me to help with the action design on that, and just because of the nature of the sort of movements she was asking for, I thought that Mike would be better placed to help her with that particular sort of genre of action. So I passed her on to Mike, who's a great guy.
I will give you one little clue to that one, and that is he put me onto this Academy Award winning documentary about a climber who climbed this. I can't remember. It's out in the Yellowstone National Park, but
El Capitan,
and he did it freehand. And watching that documentary, I had to stop it every few minutes because it was terrifying. Because he had no, abseiling equipment or no climbing equipment whatsoever, and that was just really interesting too, understanding the psychology of this climber who determined, no, I'm not going to do it today, but yes, I am going to do this climb on this particular day, and all the elements involved in that. That's the only clue I'll give to this yet unscripted story.
I think it's interesting because I think that's the beauty about the Phantom, and we've talked about this, is that we've got a saying on the podcast, he's not a condom full of walnuts. He's not just a muscle-bound idiot where he's just all brute. He's got that live, that swimmer body shape, or that AFL almost, where you have to be able to hit hard, have to be able to run, you have to be able to, run faster than lightning, chase down a deer. These are all jungle sayings that explain who the Phantom is. But so he's almost like the most rounded athlete, I guess you could probably he would be. So like, would you agree with that, Alex? Or because
100%, he's an extremely well-rounded athlete, and that's one of the reasons that we keep recommending other people for Julie to speak to as specialists, because I can do a lot with the fight work and that sort of stuff. but there are, there are limits to everyone's knowledge, and I'm not as good at parkour as Mike Snow is, and so when that sort of movement came up, there was no one I would recommend more highly for Julie to talk to.
So is your speciality fight scenes?
Um, in stunts in Australia, probably somewhere between fighting, rigging, and fire. I do a lot of wire work and sort of
Yeah.
rigging stuff as well. But yeah,
And that's yeah.
I certainly involved myself in a lot of fight scenes. Martial arts was something I got into martial arts when I was a little kid. Even before the circus, I was a martial artist, and have now studied quite a few different martial arts in the course of my stunt career. Because for stunt work, it's obviously very valuable to have different martial arts and be able to throw on a different style for different characters. And so I've studied quite broadly. I'm not really I wouldn't call myself a true master of any one martial art. I'm not. I haven't really dove really deep into any one martial art. I'm not bad at a bunch of them, but I've studied very broadly. So I used to pick up. I do between 6 months and 2 years of an art to pick up kind of the basic shapes and how they thought and how it looked. And then I would just move on to another art. I'd pick up another art the next 6 months or the next year or whatever to work on. So I'd always have one or two arts that I was learning that were new and kind of keep developing the different skills because obviously for us in action design and as a stunt performer, we never know what we're going to be asked to do. One day I might be a karate practitioner, and the next day I'm a boxer, and the next day I'm a wrestler, and the next, so it's really important for us to diversify our knowledge of fighting.
And I guess that's also what we would probably expect of the Phantom as well. Like,
Yeah.
if he existed, is someone who I
he
guess has
exists,
a wide what would you call it? A wide expertise or a wide knowledge of across the board.
It has certainly helped me in designing for him that I'm not limited to one art. I can pull from 50 different arts from around the world and go, oh yeah, I think this one might suit this particular movement is might suit this particular scene and what we're trying to get across here. So we can pull from different places from everywhere because just like the Phantom, I've done a lot of cross training. I'm not quite as good at the Phantom as most of these things, but I've at least understood the basics that the Phantom has, which is good.
Reminds me of the old, I think it was 90s, with Van Damme. Was it The Quest? I think it was, and they had the different where they all come together and they had the different styles and all that. So
yeah, so many great 80s movies, such great action.
Yeah, we're showing our age here.
Look, it's not necessarily just your age. I've had I've been absolutely blessed to work with the Jackie Chan stunt team on a film, and they are still absolutely like top of the game. The Jackie Chan stunt team is still going. Jackie Chan is getting on in his years and is doing less raw action stuff that he used to, but his stunt team is still going very strong, and they are still absolutely world class. They're fantastic performers.
Yeah, well.
But I do in the future want to talk about simulacra, and I do in the future want to talk about the Precipice game if it gets written, because I don't know what's happening at the moment. So yeah.
Yeah. So Julie, before we go, you talked about that you do write other stories, fantasy and some other comics and all that. Before, can you just tell us quickly about those where people can follow your work on social media and stuff like that?
Yeah, I've been a bit quiet lately because I'm working on an epic, 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 epic fantasy story set in Oman in the 8th, 9th century. And it's all about the jinn. And Marcelo Baez who's also a phantom artist. He's the artist on board this.
Oh, nice.
The outline is like 20,000 words, just the outline. And I've worked actually with an archaeologist as well, who's from England, to make sure that I get a lot of the architecture and a lot of the an understanding of the differences between villages and cities at that time. And he's been on digs in Oman. But beyond that, I'm not going to talk about it. And also, I've got, as I'm just about to script, I have approached Alex about a year ago about the possibility now that I'm about to script that he'll help me with some of the fight scenes in that, because we are talking about interdimensional scenes here, so there might be a different way of looking at things. So that's what I'm working on at the moment.
And what's the best way for people to be able to follow your work?
Probably go on my website and have a look. And I will be updating my website very soon, and I'll add some components to that. I'm not very good on Instagram because there's lots of artwork I want to put up on that, but some of the artwork's not released yet. Um, but probably Facebook as well. Facebook, I do a lot of things on there.
Awesome. And Alex, tell us a little bit about what you're working on at the moment, and is there anything you can share with us? And
At the moment, I'm actually just full-time fathering. I'm taking a bit of a break from professional work and working on stuff with my kid, which has been great fun.
nice. How old?
6 now.
6 now. Awesome. Just the one?
Just the one at this stage, yeah, just the one.
Yeah.
Um,
I've just had my
in
third, and they're hard work, mate.
in terms of there's a fair chance if you're into comic book movies, you've seen some of my work. I'm out there, but as the stunt team, we don't attract a lot of attention. Our job is to not be seen front and center. So
Well, tell
I
us a
don't
little bit about that if you can. That'll be
um
You've got some
like
major credits, Alex.
I
Talk
oh,
about them.
I've got a couple. I've got
Just a
um
couple.
for the comic book fans, probably Shang-Chi was my favorite film that I got to work on. That was just incredible to fun to work on. That was with the Chan stunt team, which was amazing. Um, and was a huge amount of fun. I've done a couple of other comic book movies. I did the Wolverine and a couple of other Wolverine Origins a while ago. I've worked on some of the Mad Maxes and Furiosa, that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think this is for the comics, not for the movies. I don't think we don't need to get
no,
into my
it's
filmography.
no, it's nice to be able to, know that you're not just, that you're actually out there doing it, and you actually are someone who knows what they're talking about. So yeah,
I've had a
it's
little bit
good
of
to be able.
practice. I've
Yeah,
been
yeah,
working
yeah,
in film for nearly 20 years.
yeah.
Yeah, nearly 20 years now. So
Nice. Well, look, and Alex, do you have a social media page or a website where people can see your work or
oh,
anything like that? No?
I've got some reels on YouTube, I think, but I'm not really a social media person. I have an Instagram, but I don't really use it. There's not much up there. If you're welcome, people are welcome to find it. It'll be Alex Jewson stunts wherever you're trying to find me. But I don't really use any of the social media stuff. I'm not super into it.
No worries. Too busy being a father. Look, Julie, Alex, really appreciate you joining us. I hope your fans have enjoyed it. Getting a bit of an insight on how the Phantom moves, how the Phantom fights in different scenes, and talking about the psychology behind how the Phantom will do certain things has been really interesting. So have really enjoyed that a lot. Thank you, people, for listening and or watching us. As we said before, our website is chroniclechamber.com. We would love to hear your thoughts, feedback, and opinions on our social media platforms or over at our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to us via YouTube or through your favourite podcast apps, including iTunes and or Spotify. Thank you. Please get in contact with us. And as always, happy Phantoming.
Thank you, Jermaine.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much,
Alex.
Julie and Jermaine.
Enemies beware, the Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He fights you.